Yay.
Hello,
Hey.
this is Roni,
And this is Jen.
and this is the Field Guide to Healing.
Woo! I feel like we haven't done a formal introduction like that in a long time.
Yeah, I think we kind of lost our way for a hot couple of episodes, but we're
Lost but
back.
now found.
But
We're
found, we
back.
followed the guide. So for all of you who are maybe just tuning in, this is Field Guide to Healing. We are a podcast about mental health, coping skills, resourcing from two mental health clinicians slash humans. And this is our last episode of the season.
Wow. Number 10.
Yeah, two digits, everyone.
Yeah, double digits. Let's go.
Woo! And this field guide we decided is going to be one that is, pretty on par with the month of June. It is the field guide to Pride.
Yay.
Yay!
Field guide to pride. And I think
Yeah.
the beautiful thing about what we're doing with this episode is talking about what the month of pride means, even as someone who's not part of the LGBTQ plus community, right? Like how to be an ally in all sense of the word of allyship, how to connect with yourself, an ally with who you truly are as a person, right? We're really gonna, I guess, deep dive, but also like bird's eye view, exploring these conversations, which for a lot of people, they can be kind of hard to have, talking about identities. So hopefully, Ronnie and I are able to hold space for one another, hold space for you, and also, like, you know, explore what it's like to talk about things that make people squirm sometimes, make people nervous in a way that's open and loving. So maybe setting some examples for how you can talk about this kind of stuff too.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. So, um, kind of as we ease in here, we're going to celebrate the spirit of pride as we kind of move along some different stories. Hopefully, as we navigate this conversation, like Jen said, you feel a little bit more enlightened. We're calling in some grace, some compassion, some curiosity for ourselves and for all of you listeners as we move through this conversation. We're really happy you are here and happy Pride.
Happy Pride. Let's go.
Yeah. So, first things first, I think we should define pride.
Mhm. And we're starting with Wikipedia.
Yes.
Merriam-Webster, you've done us a C minus to be real. But Wikipedia actually like really they did something here. I don't know if it was AI who wrote it, but it's beautiful. So the definition of pride is LGBT pride is the promotion of the self-affirmation, dignity, equality, and increased visibility of lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender people as a social group. Pride, as opposed to shame and social stigma, is the predominant outlook that bolsters most LGBT rights movements.
Mm, yeah. And for those of you who might not be aware of the more full acronym, it is 2S LGBTQIAA plus. Um, Starting with two spirit individuals, centering them at the beginning of this acronym to honor them. So I think as we have this definition, it's important to talk a little bit about the history of pride. So the history of pride really begins with the Stonewall riots. um, this was a time where the people who were being really ostracized and gone after by police and all these different organizations really decided to fight back and to just say no, like we're standing our ground, we're not allowing this to happen anymore. And really it was this social movement, this progressive social justice type activism that we see continue to ripple through the community to this very day. So as much as it is a time to celebrate and to show that pride and to honor those individuals who took those steps, it really is a continuation of that same sentiment, that same energy. We're still fighting. We still have brothers, sisters, individuals, family in this community who are being harmed, who are being ostracized, and it is still happening. So, like, pride is just as much as it is about pride and being courageous and happy as it is mourning and doing the work and the reflection and continuing the
Mm.
same things. So, speaking of historical events in Pride, Jen actually has a kind of cool story, a cool moment about this next one. If you'd like to share about it.
Yeah. So June 26th, 2015, I was at the beach with my mom and a couple friends, and we went to, it was called Asbury Park. It's a historically LGBTQ plus loving space. And we were like walking through the streets, it was Pride Month, they had all the flags hanging, and we found out that gay marriage has been legalized. And
Mm,
the amount of joy that everyone was experiencing out like openly was so beautiful. There was so much merriment and like connection. And I was 18 at the time, in a small
yeah,
farm town. So for me, this was like a colossal experience that stuck with me. Being able to
yeah,
be around so many people, just be like celebrating the fact that they get to that. I was going to say that they get to openly be themselves, but I think it was the hope that was inspired in that moment that one day everyone who's part of this community gets to hopefully openly be themselves or continue in that fight. This was like a huge moment for the gay
yeah.
community, and
Mm,
being able to like be there and feel that collective energy was like magic.
yeah. Yeah, definitely a historical moment to say the least for our community. And such a moment for you to kind of have encapsulated in that memory as well.
Yeah.
Um, this law came about because of the court case. I'm hoping to say this last name correctly. So Obergefell versus Hodges. This was in 2011, so this is 4 years prior. Um, their long-term partner, John Hodges, or not John Hodges, John Arthur, was diagnosed with ALS. And in July of 2013, Obergefell and a gravely ill Arthur were then taken via like private flight to be legally married in Maryland. However, they met with a civil rights attorney and they were told, due to the Ohio same-sex marriage ban, that they on their death certificate for Arthur, he wasn't able to be listed as his spouse. So this obviously was met with immense grief, and as you see, this kind of progressed into a larger, more far reaching type of moment in history that led to this. So we thank them for what was a courageous battle, and
Mhm.
I'm grateful to know that that was overturned. um, so as we continue, we're going to kind of ease into kind of an ebb and flow here. We're going to be touching on some highlights, and we're going to be touching on some of the lowlights of Pride as well. I think it is to do our diligence of reporting both sides of this beautiful coin. Um, so part of that, Jen, if you want to like kind of dive in on this conversation with me, moves into intersectionality. So we're going to define
Mm.
that. So like, what is that, if you could?
Yeah. So I think intersectionality is kind of a buzzword now. Um, Maybe not. Maybe it's a buzzword in our community as
Yeah.
counselors. However, intersectionality, when we're talking about identity, is how all the different parts of who a person is intersect and what that
Mm,
means for how they show up to spaces and how they choose to present themselves and how others perceive them despite how they
yeah.
choose to present themselves.
Yeah.
So what does this mean? I'll use myself as an example. When I enter any space, I am aware of the fact that I am a 5 foot tall, female presenting person, and I scanned around me and establish safety. That's the first thing that I do.
Yeah.
Um, the reason why it's important to be aware of someone's identities is because it'll give you insight into how they're feeling when they enter a space. Um, I had someone who is a male who is over 6 feet tall say that they were taught growing up to be aware of their size and how they can cause other people to feel around them. And not
Yeah.
in a way to say who you are is a problem, you're an unsafe person. It's to say, in your identity and your appearance, you have privilege as being a person who is big, appearing strong, possibly intimidating, and being aware of the fact that other people may see you in that way can help you be a nurturing, open hearted person that can try
Yeah.
to connect in ways like heart to heart, making that eye contact, making sure that you offer a gentle smile. You following me? Am I making sense?
Yeah, absolutely. We're talking about the different intersectional identities that two individuals hold that interact with one another.
Yeah, and that's just two identities, right? So
Yeah.
now let's do a whole let's do a 180 here. There's a really cool book, Disability Visibility, and one of the so in this book, it's all like different individuals who have disabilities writing an essay about their life experiences. So now let's say that we're talking about um, a female who uses a wheelchair, who is also bisexual and African American. Those four identities. Some of them you can see, some of them you cannot see. Some of them are some of these identities. When I say them, I'm talking about the different identities. Some of these identities can cause people to feel like they're at a disadvantage. It also can make other people who are not familiar with what it's like to have certain identities feel uncomfortable, not really know how to talk to you, make you look away.
Yeah.
So, yeah. So when we talk about intersecting identities, right? Imagine how this woman must feel coming into a space knowing that people don't want to make eye contact. People don't know how to treat them or look at them, how to have a conversation with them. And this is why the book is called Disability Visibility, because by being aware of all the differences and how we show up to spaces, all these different identities that people have, we can open our hearts to compassion and bring it back to a person to person level rather than a myself to someone I don't understand level. So that dissonance is not, we don't really need it to be there if we have the openness and the willingness to approach situations by knowing who we are and being open to, not even comfortable with, right? Because can be new for us to be aware of our identity and someone else's identity in a way that is actually safe, and not like the scary, like, oh no, I'm having an ism or ist happening. Like
Mhm.
racism, racist is what I mean by ism or ist. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, I feel like I'm getting a little ranty here, something that I like to talk about a lot. So, Ronnie, do you have any questions or things you can add to keep us going in the right direction?
So I think kind of circling back to why are we bringing this up? How is this relevant to pride? Is
Mm.
a good way for us to begin to understand this. And I think part of that is the work of destigmatizing these intersectional identities. And how can we, bridge that gap? In what ways might we be able to do that work?
Hmm.
Would be a question I have.
Yeah, and we'll actually be getting into this later. We're going to talk specifically about what it means to be an ally, which is this was what that work falls under.
Yeah.
Like confronting yourself, being aware of your own bias, and not saying, "Oh my God, am I homophobic?" and like being
Yeah.
afraid of that thought. It's saying, "Oh, I'm in a system that has the general undertone of homophobia, and it has influenced my thinking. How do I actually feel about gay people?"
Yeah, like what are my thoughts? Can we deprogram and integrate our own perspectives? So we kind of broke this down into the idea of a reductionist perspective versus the expansive perspective. And how I see this is in the reductionist perspective, we are falling into alignment with those societal undertones. We are reduced to passive kind of thinking or cognitive distortion, if you will, as opposed to an expansive perspective, being able to, again, like Jen said, notice these undertones, notice this programming, and expand upon, well, how is this impacting my life? How is this impacting my relationships potentially? How I work in the world? How I, kind of integrating yourself into that. And also, expanding your perspective from being reducing to seeking moreness, like being curious
Mm,
about an individual and their uniqueness, as opposed to assuming or reducing them to one of their identities or even multiple of their
yes.
identities.
Yes. Okay. Awesome. So, example is, oh, that person's trans. Oh, people can't hear me. I turned a blind eye, right? You look away, you cover your mouth. That's, I mean, I've seen that happen myself. People having that kind of response when they see someone who could be trans at the grocery store, out in public.
Yeah.
You're reducing them to a single identity that you don't know a lot about, which causes feelings of discomfort, or that your religion tells you doesn't truly exist because A plus B doesn't equal a baby, right?
Yeah.
Approaching with this with the expansive perspective. Oh, that's a person. They're trans. That's really cool, right? That's one thought. That, but if we're sticking to the open-minded view, it's just being able to allow yourself to notice that there's a person in your space that you have not encountered before, or that you notice that you feel uncomfortable around in general, and you allow yourself to actually be in that space with that person rather than reducing them to what their identity presents as, because that's just your interpretation. You don't even
Yeah.
know who they really are.
Yeah, and I like the idea of like plugging into your shared humanity. So like what things do I have in common with a human without maybe even interacting with them? Well, I can assume we both have feelings. We both have people who care about us. We both have dreams. We both have experienced pain in our lives. We, like there's things that we can find common ground on that are so innately separate from this externalized social or like whatever, like it's so separate from these identities.
Yeah. And that's the thing, right? We only seem to notice that other identities, and when I say we, I talk about the collective systemic oppression and like the United States Western perspectives and views of LGBTQ look like or sound like. This isn't just about the gay community. This is also different religions, different races, really any different ethnicities. We are always taking in information around us and making assumptions. That does not mean that we are seeing people negatively. It means that our brain is working the way it's supposed to. It's taking in information and categorizing, and being aware of the fact that we naturally categorize to make sense of opens the door wide open for you to say, okay, let me make sense of. How can I connect to the people that I am around? Um, for anyone who has ever been in a space. Now, I'm a white person and I live around predominantly white people, and I've been in spaces where I've been the minority in the situation, but that's not my normal lived experience, right? So let's say like there is a black person in a space, let's say they're at school and it's a predominantly white or predominantly Hispanic town that they're living in. They know they're comfortable like with that feeling. It's ingrained in what their experience is. Okay, I got it. So, cutting that off right there, I was really ranting. Um, but the reason why I have so much to say about it is because when we talk about our intersecting identities, there are so many differences within each of us with our political views, religious beliefs, what we ethically and morally deem as fair, unfair, right, and wrong. That's like there's like a storm inside of each of us that like creates who we truly are as people. And when we reduce someone to just what we see them as, we're not giving ourselves the chance to be humans, to really connect with the people that are around us.
Yeah.
So don't
Yeah.
sell yourself short, right? You're able to perceive who's around you, but you don't have to be afraid. You can be curious.
Yeah.
You don't have to close
Yeah.
off. You can, again, be curious.
Yeah, definitely. Mm. Mm.
Mm-mm-mm. As Ronnie was saying, plugging into your community. Give yourself the chance.
Yeah,
Hand over that aux
absolutely.
cord.
And like For those of us who are a part of the community, especially in the time that we are in, there is a lot of violence and hatred and pain that's experienced within this community. And we're going to get into like what that kind of looks like a little bit more as we move into this conversation. But like tailor your social media or what you are watching or you taking in to be oriented that's toward affirming who you are. Follow creators who look like you, who sound like you. We don't have to listen to the rhetoric that might be like enforcing by erasure or different things that might be demonizing identities or questioning or trivializing like pronouns. Like we don't have to constantly take that in. Like we can have curated things on our socials to help be a safer or more brave space for us to kind of show up and feel affirmed. So definitely consider what you're taking in, consider the things and how it's impacting you. And this is for both sides. Like take a good look at the things that you're taking in and the resources that you have available to you. I think it's so important for us to be politically on top of things as best as we can, like learning, keeping an eye out, seeing how policies are impacting us and like our community. Like that's so important. But there's like balance to this. So doing our best to find a balance between the social justice and the self-care and the community care, like
Yeah.
especially the community care. This might look different for everyone, but like for some people this might mean reaching out to people, reaching out to your friends, being in spaces with other queer individuals. This might look like going inwards. This might look like retreating a little bit. This might look like creating a little safe haven in your home, in your routine. um Jen, any community care items that come to mind for you?
Mm. You my inner therapist was just like, "Community care practices," when you said that.
Yeah.
Um, but when you think about, like I think you said it so beautifully. I think the only thing that I would add is, let's say you are needing that inward work and you're not feeling very celebratory. You can be in community with your friends in that shared space.
Yeah.
Give each other the space to explore how you're feeling about
Yeah.
your own self, right? Give your friend the chance to speak out loud. Ask your friend if they have space for you to do that, or even just sitting next to each other, listening to music, watching a TV show. Could be queer, doesn't have to be. Could be Harry Potter. Who knows, right? Um, but the whole point is to allow yourselves to be in a space where how small, right? It can be like totally a singular experience, but you don't have to be alone, right? You can allow yourself to be wrapped in the love of the community through music, again, through social media, but even like allowing yourself to like giving yourself permission rather than, I mean, wherever you are in your identity development, right? Like follow
Yeah.
someone
Yeah.
if you haven't followed someone yet who is part of the community or someone that you aspire to be like. Maybe like a style icon that's part of the community, right? Like give yourself the chance to make a connection outside of, again, that storm within you. Allow it to
Yeah. Mm,
expand outward.
definitely. Mm,
And check in with your homies.
yeah.
Y-
Yeah.
If they're being quiet or if you know that they're part of the community and they're not out yet, right? Give them the chance if they want to talk about it, or if they want to do something. And maybe you can offer to be that friend.
Definitely. Holding space, being held. These are all things that we can kind of be giving and or receiving. Um, there's no wrong way here to plug in. Um, in connection with community, I think it's important that we kind of shift this conversation to something that might feel uncomfy. So I'm going to acknowledge the discomfort that might come up here. Grief during Pride and like just throughout the year. I think there's a lot of grief within our community. There are the societal stigmas, discrimination, struggle to find acceptance in a world that's really heteronormative. Um, You might find that there's loss of loved ones, mentors in the community. There's hate crimes. These are just like a couple examples, like rejection within your family or just even like society. These are all examples of trauma, of grief, of pain that is felt within the community and that can be amplified within the community. Um, Specifically, I wanted to talk a little bit about the different kinds of grief that can come up. Um, One of those we linked in our description about Jim Obergefell and his disenfranchised grief that he experienced through the process with his husband. So if you're interested in that, I've linked the video or the audio to that below. It's very interesting. It's very heartfelt and a worthwhile listen. So disenfranchised grief occurs when a loss is not acknowledged openly or when it's not socially embraced. So this is like when relationships are not considered legitimate. The deceased person isn't within the norms, or the grieving individual is a part of a marginalized group. And then there's also the stigmatization of how they've passed away over, like, you know, whether it's an overdose, a completion of suicide, COVID, AIDS. Again, so much stigma and levels of this grief. So, like, holding space for that, this is not exactly the same, but I think a universal experience of disenfranchised grief is when a pet is lost, when you lose an animal. It's not widely recognized, it's not really revered as important as the loss of someone who is a human. And this is similar to that, where it's like a spouse can be lost, but it's not recognized by the community because it is in a heterosexual relationship.
Mm.
Um, so these are just some examples
Yeah.
to consider the loss that's experienced within our community. And the reason why pride is so important is despite the active attempts of erasure or of pushing down this community, there is we're still here. We're still continuing to exist. We're still pressing on. We are still fighting for the same things in a lot of ways. So, like, holding space for the mourning that comes here, the sadness that you might experience. Um,
Mhm.
yeah, like, and also I want to hold space for mourning relationships with people who are still alive because they are unaccepting of your sexual or gender identity.
Mm.
Yeah. So, like, there's also compounded grief. This is when there's like multiple losses happening in a really short time period. This can kind of come up in like interconnected sorrow. So, like, there's this interconnectedness through these experiences. Um, and this, I think, leads us into collective grief. So, collective grief is a shared emotional response that transcends just one person having this experience, but really it is a common loss experienced by the group or by the society that we exist in. So, within this specific community, the LGBTQ plus community, this form of grief is seen in the collective impact of discrimination, prejudice, violence, and the struggle for acceptance of queer and trans individuals. And this also happens when we're hearing about attacks and murders on 2S LGBTQ plus people on the news or on our social medias, living through a pandemic. So, like, the HIV and AIDS pandemic, living through that was very traumatic, with so many losses of loved ones through that horrific progression of disease, facing rejection and alienation from family and society. So it's that double whammy of not only societally am I excluded, but familially, like, my family has excluded me. That's really painful. And then again, a death by suicide, which disproportionately affects this community, uh, both in the youth and in the adult populations. Um, so considering this part of the history, I think is really important because of the amount of lives lost this is not new news for us. The Trevor Project is founded on the loss of someone from our community in a way that is, again, horrific and unbelievable in some respects, that it still continues to this point in time. Jen, having heard some of this, I know grief is kind of my spot. Any questions, any responses or reactions before we
Yeah.
kind of
Yeah, I have two.
yeah.
The first one is I want to offer us all a somatic hug. This is pretty
Mm,
heavy hearing you. I mean, it's a lived experience. And once we hearing it summarized beautifully in the way that you have, touching into the relationship that these events have to our grief, um, that heaviness settled within me, and I want to give it the space to be felt.
yeah.
So, if anyone wants to join along, and if you're able, raise your right arm up over your head, and take your left hand and make that Nike swoosh with your thumb and pointer finger. Move your arm, the left arm, back so that your shoulder blade and elbow are in a straight line, being pulled to the left almost. And then you're going to swoop your fingers, the Nike swoosh, under your right armpit. Wrap those other fingers around. Wrap your arm, the right arm around you, and just breathe.
If anyone doesn't like the finger swoosh, you can do your whole hand and just do like a J hook right under your arm for some extra compression. I know my hands are funky sometimes and just don't like my fingers don't like doing what they should.
No shame in your finger game, okay?
That's what she said. Hashtag pride. Um, moving on.
Yeah. So then, a reflection that actually does eventually will link us into our next conversation about allyship.
Yeah.
I'm wondering if you've ever thought about, or we can take the space now to talk about systemic disenfranchisement.
I also want to pause and say that that resource is from the Elunane network, or hopefully I'm saying that right, or Eluna. And they have additional topics of conversation where they get into some barriers and challenges. If anyone wants to read further on that, I just didn't want to go through an entire article.
Yeah,
But
very cool. Thank you.
society
Hmm.
disenfranchisement, like what specifically might you want to
Yeah.
hone in on?
Yeah. So I noticed that there was a different amount of attention given to, and I'm not saying this is wrong. I think both situations deserve a lot of love. Um, but to anniversaries of shootings, depending on locations and social groups. Um, of course, children being killed in a mass shooting is horrible. Um, Sandy Hook just had their anniversary where the students would have graduated high school this year. And that's a collective grief that our entire country felt together. Um, but when we look at Club Pulse, um, I saw one or two articles, and I noticed within myself a lack of space in my direct community, my direct family, to be able to talk about it. Like,
Yeah.
I felt that disenfranchisement
Yeah.
from, and I understand that when we look at our society, and I mean, we are part of a minoritized group. I understand that. Um, but being aware of, and this is where we get into allyship, just because you aren't in a group, like, let's say you're not Jewish or Palestinian, so you're not really caring. It's like, oh, I'm American. I don't really know. I don't want to connect too deeply to what's going on in their war right now. I see it kind of like the same thing. Like, I'm not part of the community. Yeah, there was a shooting. People do hate crimes. and then you just go on with the rest of your day so smoothly. Oh, Ronnie's got.
So I think this comes into intersectional allyship. Like,
Yeah.
your social justice, if it isn't intersectional, isn't social justice. We can't pick and choose the identities or the people with whom we align to deserve to have our activism. Because if that's your activism, I don't want it.
Mm,
Because like we said, we can't pick apart people and be like, oh, like I choose to stand up for your poor identity, but not for your queer identity. Like
mhm.
like these systems are intersectional and how they impact us as well.
Yeah. When it could be, and I hope that one day it will be for most of us, if not all, I see this person is struggling. I see that an entire community had a horrible loss on this day. My heart is with them. I'm feeling for them right now. Is there anything that I can do? Is there like, do I know anyone that's part of this community that I can give a call, see if they need some, like, need me to hold space? Um, is there a petition I can sign? Which is like so easy to do now. I just go on social media, type in ACLU, HRC. I know some people find them to be divisive, but they still have awesome, um, easy access to advocacy that does not require a lot of effort if you don't have the space or if you're new to like what it means to advocate for others and to ally for like,
And
and with.
and also like so we're going to begin. I think this is a really good pivot for us to start moving into allyship and like what
Mhm.
that might look like, because I think that there's a misconception that you're an ally just by being a straight person who identifies with the gender they were assigned at birth. Like, I have a queer friend, I'm their ally, but how does that allyship actually show up?
Mhm. It doesn't mean, "Oh, I like you even though you're gay." No,
Yeah, modifiers.
that's not
Or
allyship, my friends.
no, so like allyship is, like we kind of talked about, and we're gonna really break this down, so I'm gonna like not go too hard right now, but it is raising up the voices of the people with whom do not have the privilege. We do not need to speak on their behalf. They are able to do that on their own, but if we have the privilege, it's opening up those doors, it's
Yeah,
leveraging them up, it's helping give them that boost, because it isn't equal, we aren't equitable.
and that's the thing, right? When we talk about privilege, I know that's like a hot word right now, a hot button for a lot of
Everything.
a lot of people in a lot of different groups. Um, when we talk about privilege, we're talking about the fact that things are not the same for all of us. And for
Yeah.
some of us, things are easier, and it's okay to admit that. Even if you had to struggle, that's great. That's one of your intersecting identities that had to bust your butt. You know what I mean? Like it's okay to acknowledge where you have privilege, meaning where you have a voice, where you are welcomed in a
Yeah.
space.
Yeah.
Because you can then use that privilege, like you can acknowledge, wow, I feel so grateful that I feel safe here. Right. So it's you get to acknowledge the space that you're in, and then also that's the key. Being able to acknowledge within yourself what your privileges are is saying, okay, now what can I do? How can I reshape where I am so that everyone else can join me here?
I have something I need to add this because this is so good and it's sparking me. I think we also need to hold space for patriarchy. The shit trickles down. We are collectively all harmed by these systems. So
Mhm.
like, yes, we are all getting some kind of trade-off here. Not to say like we don't need to get into it, but eat the rich.
Mhm.
Rest my case there. Moving forward, we are all impacted by this. So yes, you might have privileged identities where you're like, "Oh my god, but I'm still poor. Oh my god, I
Mhm.
still this. Oh my god, I still that." Yes. Go ahead.
Listen, when we talk about patriarchy too and privilege, we love our men. And I say that because patriarchy doesn't mean down with men. I mean, sometimes it's thrown out there in like a fun, playful way, like man sober, boy sober, right? But anyway, um, white men in their 50s are the most likely to complete suicide. Okay, so patriarchy also erases the struggles that men experience. Okay, all of us are part of the systemic oppression, even if the system is set up to tell us that we're not. Okay, it's being able to acknowledge what your place is within it so that we can start to dismantle it. So,
Yeah,
for
and how are
example,
we
yeah,
perpetuating it? So, like
yeah,
Jen said way earlier, re-establishing the connection of how am I unconsciously contributing to the fabric of this patriarchy?
yeah.
Because
And
we all are.
yeah, and it doesn't mean you're a bad person. It means that you're part of a society. And the cool thing about society, especially when we have freedoms within our society, is being able to say, do I like it? No. And yeah, you might get backlash. You will get backlash, but you have the freedom to receive that backlash. And again, I'm speaking from a privileged position here, and I'm aware of that. I'm willing to receive backlash.
Yeah.
And it's okay
Yeah.
if you're not able to, if it's unsafe to, right? Because there's hopefully, I'm putting my arms out as a collective hug.
Hug.
The
Yeah.
yeah, the whole world in my hands here. Um, the people we lift each other up.
Yeah. Mm.
Okay, so I found a really cool resource talking about allyships called the Guide to Allyship, um,
Amazing.
and I feel like I learned a lot about like being an ally within intersectionality.
Yeah.
May we jump in?
Yeah.
Cool. Okay. So what I took away from the article that I read is that our systems shape our perceptions, our expectations, what we recognize as right and wrong, and these things are what form our biases. So, like, remember, when we take in the things around us, our brain is supposed to make it more digestible. It's supposed to categorize everything, and that's where our biases come from.
Yeah.
So being an ally means recognizing that we are all part of the system of oppression because it is the world that we have been born into. So that's what we're perceiving and categorizing everything within because it's what's around us, it's what we're taught.
Yeah.
Okay. And from this stance, we can then ask ourselves, what can we do to improve the system to make our world a better place and a space for everyone in it, right? Collective world hug. Um,
Yes.
so
Mm.
sounds pretty, right? But what do we do? So this is where a lot of the language is being pulled from the article from the Guide to Allyship. Um, so that's linked down below. Please give it a
Yes.
look. It's
So many
awesome.
links. So many
Yeah.
links this episode.
Yeah. And I'm actually really happy that we were able to like find more resources outside of the ones that we already have just
Yeah.
from creating this episode. It's so cool. Um, okay. So they say that an equitable reaction to making a mistake in our language or catching ourselves with perpetuating a bias on accident. The example that they gave is stepping on toes.
Yeah.
Um, some people have cowboy boots and some people have on sandals. And this is a really cool way to frame it because some people are going to give us ouchies and some people are going to get hurt. Um, a really good example of this is misgendering.
Yeah.
What do we do? So, this is their steps, right? They have 5 approaches. Um, I'll go over them and then I'll give the responses with the example from stepping on toes. So, center the impacted. So, impacted. There's no victim mentality here, right? Because you don't see someone as less than. You're not trying to hurt someone, and we know that, right? So, you want to focus your attention on the person that you accidentally hurt.
Yeah. Mm.
Okay. Um, I know I said that I was going to read the responses after, but it feels natural to do it now.
Okay.
So, a really easy way to do that is just asking the person, "Are you okay?" This, if you're around other people, right, be aware of that. You can give them a look, or you can grab their hand if they're a close person in your life, right? Just like let them know that you messed up.
Yeah.
Checking in. Okay, so the next one is listen to their response and learn. So you're not listening defensively, but you're listening openly, so that you can know how this specific person wants to move forward with you, how they prefer to like handle when this happens. They may not care at all, or they or like, dude, you've done this like 40 times now, right? So it's person to person. That's the most important thing. So you want to learn like what each person in your life expects from you. And that's fine because we do that with everything anyway, right? Like if you think about our friends, some people keep their phone on do not disturb all the time, right? It's like just another thing, another piece of information to integrate into what this person is in our life.
Yes. And also, I want to hold space for this person might be willing to teach you on their lived experience in the dynamic of your relationship, but don't expect
Mm.
the person or other people to teach you or to show you. Take it upon yourself to do that work, to learn,
Yes.
and to figure out what questions you need to be curiously exploring. Do the work, do your own
Thank
work.
you. Thank you
Yeah.
so much for saying that because it's so important. It's not up to the person who you've offended or a person in your life who's part of a minoritized group that you want to uplift and like ally with.
Yeah.
When we say listen to the response and learn, it means taking in new information to add to your bank of info on how you can handle situations based off of what you just went through. And it also means like doing the work
Yeah,
later
do
on,
the
like having
work
more
and
questions,
learn. It's like learn from
research.
that situation and also continue to learn what that means and how that might be showing up in other parts of your personhood.
Yeah, just increasing your self awareness, right?
Yeah,
Like, if you're not a bad person, you don't have to be afraid of making mistakes. It's
totally.
okay. So the next one is apologize for the impact you had on that person, even though you didn't intend it, right? Just say sorry. It's okay. It really is okay to make a mistake as long as you're not getting defensive and blaming the person, right?
Yes.
That's when things get like so far off base here because you're trying to maintain I'm a good person, I'm a good person. That part of you needs to like feels the need to protect itself when we're welcoming again, this is like also allying with yourself here. Like all parts of you are welcome, all of your identities, pitfalls, biases, unconscious or chosen, right? Everything's welcome here as long as you're able to be in the moment with the person that you've impacted and you're able to yield yourself, surrender to the mistake that you've made. There's
Yeah.
no room for your own personal pride to get in the way.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, okay. Next one is stop the instance from happening. So stepping on toes example, it says move your foot.
Yep. Mm.
Don't keep the boot on someone's bare feet. Ow, right? You're just like continuing to stand there. And that's what happens when you have that defensive response.
Yeah, so we really have to learn how to listen and accept that criticism. So, like, how can we do that with grace, even if it's uncomfortable? Because it is uncomfortable receiving that kind of feedback, but it's also necessary to be able to do so in a way that's graceful and do the
Yeah.
work to feel those feelings separate. They don't need to be your audience for your uncomfortable feelings.
Like, oh my God, this is so embarrassing. I'm so sorry. I can't believe that I did that. Okay, you're making it a million times worse because you're, again, like,
Centering
the,
yourself and your own feelings. That's what you're
yes.
doing.
Yes. And it's also framing because you're making your own feelings the priority, it's framing it as if that person's identity makes you uncomfortable, when really it's the new language. And if they do make you uncomfortable, I offer you an invitation by saying that is okay too, if it hinges on the if you are
Yeah.
willing to figure out why,
Mhm. Yes.
and it hinges on that if as long as you're willing to make figure out why.
Yes. Do the work, explore, navigate, find the field guide, figure it out.
Mhm.
Beautiful.
Beautiful. And then the last one is stop the pattern. Um, be careful where you step in the future.
Yeah.
When it comes
Yeah.
to oppression, we want to actually change. So, sticking with the stepping on toes example, change the footwear to get rid
Yeah.
of the privilege and oppression. So, the article uses the example of sneakers for all, right? But metaphors only stretch so far. We need to
Yeah.
use some practical application.
Yeah, absolutely. Mm. So all of this to sum up is it sounds like the goal of growing as an ally is to restore and maintain the dignity and respect for everybody involved. So not only the person who you harmed, but yourself. So still it might be hard in the moment because these issues do feel really charged in our society, but the only way to break that cycle of fear is to begin integrating and doing the work. It's the only way it becomes less scary.
Mhm.
So we're kind of getting toward the end here. We have a couple more important little tidbits that we'd like to send you off with
Yeah.
before we close this one up.
Mhm. In our regular fashion, we like to summarize things in digestible pieces to walk away with.
Yeah.
So there are 4 pillars of allyship. 1, yielding. You yield your own emotional reactions to what just happened. You aren't mad at yourself. I mean, you can be, right? But that's not the time. You yield to what just happened and to the person that you love or the person that, I mean, it could be someone totally new that you're talking to, right? But you yield your own emotions to them so
Yeah.
that they're able to be the center for that moment.
Yeah.
Okay. Number
Mm.
2, listening.
Mm.
Listen. You can't learn if you don't listen.
Yeah.
If you're defensive, you can't listen. So tune into yourself so that you can hear what others are saying. Um, last second one or last
Second to
second,
last. Second to
truly,
last.
yeah. Oh, that maybe that's what my brain just did. The third one, learning. So that's
Mm-hmm.
doing the work on your own, researching if you have any questions. Um,
Yes. Yes.
YouTube, awesome resource. Instagram, amazing resource. You can follow so many people and like see what their day to day life is. Guess what? It's just like yours. Um, and so if you are someone who does have discomfort or fear, I rolled my eyes. I'm sorry. I'm calling you in to be an ally along with us. Don't fear. The field guide is here.
Yeah. No need to fear. You've got a field guide for that.
But you, really though, you can any discomfort that you're confronting, you can learn about, right? You can look it up.
Yeah. And expose yourself to like different things. Like watch film and literature about Black, Indigenous people. Watch things about queer individuals. Learn about their history. Learn about what they've been through. Learn about what pride is about. And maybe a lot of you, that's what you're doing here. You're like, oh, Field Guide to Pride. Yeah, this is it.
Yeah, this is how
We're
you
digging
learn.
in. Yeah.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
thanks for being here. Thanks for listening.
Look at you taking action, which is step 4, right? Take action. So that could be in the process of education. It could be in the process of calling each other in, right? The classic example is in the United States for people who celebrate Thanksgiving, having to be around those cranky conservative relatives. Uh, Challenge yourself, call them in if you're able, if it's safe to. That's a way to take action. Another way to take action is everything else that we've listed before. Um,
Yeah.
Going to actual events, really showing
Activism.
up. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep,
Yeah.
and then I think it goes right back around to yielding, taking the action to allow yourself to be uncomfortable with something that you just did and giving yourself permission to be quiet, listen, respect, learn, and integrate what you've just learned into taking action again and again and again. It is cyclical, and it's just the continuing to show up and be there for the people around you who
Yeah.
need your support.
Mm. So I hope you all enjoyed this little call to action, this Pride episode. I think was really informative. We definitely hammered in on some things that I think are important here. And I think as we continue on over the next couple of seasons, we'll be able to integrate into some different types of Pride episodes. So I hope you're able to tune in next year. And yeah,
Wow.
what?
Next next couple of seasons, it really does hit me. This is the last one.
Yeah.
Woo!
So we're gonna end here. Jen and I are gonna read this little thing that we've written. I will start. So this
Okay.
is to all of our queer folks and friends, and maybe to some of our allies as well. So to be queer is to be strong, to be brave, to be who you truly are in a world that makes you sometimes feel less. It is not about being an outcast, but about standing out, about being different in the most beautiful and authentic way possible.
It is the ignorance of others, of those who cannot comprehend the beauty and depth of love beyond their limited understanding, that casts us aside. They do not see the beauty in loving someone of the same sex and being fluid in our genders. They reject what they do not understand, what does not fit into their narrow view of the world.
But we are not defined by their limitations, by their ignorance. We are not confined to their boxes or their categories. We are so much more than that. We are boundless, limitless, and abundant in our love and our identities.
When we truly get to know someone, when we strip away the labels and the stereotypes, we see the humanity in each other. We see the beauty, the complexity, the richness of each individual soul. We are more than our sexual orientation, more than our gender identity. We belong as beings of love, of compassion, of endless possibilities.
So do not let the world define you. Do not let the ignorance of others diminish your light. Embrace who you are, love who you love, and know that you are radiant and a powerful force to be reckoned with. You are not an outcast. You are a pioneer, a warrior, a beacon of hope and love in a world that so desperately needs it. So embrace your truth, embrace your uniqueness, and shine brightly for all to see. Happy Pride.
Oh, I know we wrote that, but dang.
So if that doesn't encapsulate our feelings and our sentiments as we move forward in these last few weeks of formal Pride, because Pride really is all year long. Um, yeah.
Yeah. All right, so down to business.
All right, y'all.
um, Wrapping up the whole season, right? So this is just the end of an awesome experimental first chapter, finding ourselves as business owners, podcasters, expanding what it means to be a healer.
Yeah. Mm.
Um, and we have some more stuff coming, right? So we're gonna take a break
Yeah.
for the
Yeah.
summer.
Mm.
But don't you worry, we'll still have some awesome video content coming out on YouTube. Um,
Yeah.
Make sure you stay tuned, keep an eye out for all the fun stuff we have in store. Um,
Yeah. Make sure that you follow us on socials so you can keep up with Field Guide to Healing as we continue to make our website this summer. We release meditations, yoga, Reiki, sound healing, and maybe some other fun side quests to support us on our healing journeys. I can't believe here we are at the bottom of episode 10. For all of those who have stuck with us through these past 6 months to this journey, thank you for your viewership and your listening. We're really excited to restore, energize, and cook up some really fun stuff. So you'll be seeing us really soon.
mhm. Ooh, okay. So as we bid you farewell for a couple months, remember, self-awareness is your compass, guiding you back to your center. Understanding your own rhythms is a true strength to help you navigate your emotions and reactions.
So join us next time as we dive deeper into the human experience. Until then, breathe, find balance, and know that you're not alone on this journey.
Love this episode? Share it with a friend who wants to ride the waves of awareness with us.
Thanks for tuning in. Stay mindful, stay present, and keep exploring that extraordinary world within. And until then, happy Pride and catch you on the trails.
Catch you on the trails.
Oh, I knew it. Until next time. Bye, y'all.